Hello and welcome to Staying Ahead of the Curve. I'm Jeff Snyder, Vice President, Senior Consultant with Camac Retirement Group, and we're visiting Washington, D.C. today. We're up on the Hill, and today I've got with me a return guest, Beth. She's tax counsel for Senator Benjamin Cardin of Maryland. Beth, thanks for great to have you on the show again.
Oh, of course, thanks again for having me.
And I know we want to get into the kind of meat and potatoes of our conversation in National Retirement, Safer Retirement Security Week and tax reform, but I know I want to give the disclaimer that the opinions you're about to express are those of you yourself, and not necessarily those of Senator Benjamin Cardin of Maryland.
That's right. Thank you.
So I got that right. We don't have to put that at the bottom, and you don't have to say it. One of the things, I was just at the NAGDA conference, and I think one of the things that we talked about, I actually moderated the legislative panel. We talked about National Retirement Security Week, and Senator Cardin and Senator Enzi were instrumental in the passage of this bill, and I wonder if you might share your perspective on the bill and the week and what it means for your office.
I'd be happy to. It means quite a bit for our office. Senator Cardin has cared deeply about retirement security issues for a very long time, as we've talked about before. That resolution actually used to be National Save for Retirement Week, and it was recently updated, not this year, but in the last year, to National Retirement Security Week, because we think retirement security kind of is more than savings. Yep. So Senator Cardin cares a lot about lifetime income issues especially, and so the resolution lays out kind of the challenges that we're still facing in the area and some recommendations from the Senate on what we should do to address those challenges.
And there were also some other co-sponsors. I don't want to leave those folks out. And there's a press release. I know NAGDA put something out, but there are other people that were involved. Several other senators and also their staff.
Yes, and it's bipartisan too. I should note it's Enzi, Collins, Wyden. I'm sure I'm forgetting a few folks, but it is really. I think it just underscores that retirement policy, as again we've talked about before, is a bipartisan issue.
That's great to hear, especially in today's Washington.
Yes.
So, kind of shifting gears a little bit. Last time we chatted was in August, and we had talked about possibly the pivot of tax reform, and as of today is the second day of October, and as of last Monday there was kind of a framework announced, or maybe it was Wednesday. There was an announcement, I think, on Monday that there would be a framework announced about tax reform.
Yes, we're all about the announcements.
Yes,
the announcements.
We have the press release. The press release about the show will be coming out momentarily. Wanted to get your thoughts about the framework. We often talk, this show is really for educational purposes only, and you've always shared, and your colleague Preston and others have shared about how you all work as staff to make whatever the senators and folks want to happen. And there's this collegiality that exists between all of you all. Wonder if you could share a little bit about the tax reform, the framework, et cetera, everything that you've seen thus far.
Yes. So in terms of, you're right, the framework kind of represents that pivot to tax reform that we've been talking about. The pivot has been happening ever so slowly. Yeah. We took a little bit of detour for healthcare again at the end of last month, but now it seems that the attention of the members is turning, I wouldn't say squarely back. Healthcare is still a big deal, and there's still bipartisan work going on there, but for the most part, the attention has shifted to tax reform, and the framework was a big part of that. I think what you said about collegiality is especially important because the framework, even where it's specified particular, say, rates, individual brackets, areas of focus, some credits and deductions were called out by name, a lot of the work was left to the committees. And I really do, I think that shows how much work is left to be done, how much we really need to start working together on teasing out even some of the medium-level details that have been left. And so far, I think there's kind of a hope that will continue to happen. Right now, the process hasn't been right now it's been a Republican-focused process, but I think that now that we have this framework out there, members will have something to react to, which will be good, and we'll start the discussions. I think that in terms of retirement policy in general, our office was pleased that some of the goals that we espouse were included in the framework. Where there's a lot of play in the joints, though, so we're going to be paying close attention to just how the retirement tax benefits that the framework wants to preserve will be, once we get down to the details, will be drafted in any tax reform proposal.
Yeah, it's always about the details, and I think it's important to point out that, in our industry that I'm in, we're focused on retirement, but there's so many other things that these members and these senators and congresspeople are focused on. There may be foreign relations issues that are going on that divert attention, or we talked last time and this time about health care. There's all these multitude of issues that many of these congressmen and women and senators serve on multiple committees, and so their time, there's only 24 hours in a day and 7 days in a week. They can only focus on so many things, and their staffs can only focus on so many things. So I think we need to be cognizant that it's going to take time to flesh out details about tax reform, because attention may be diverted towards what's going on in foreign policy or other areas.
Right, and I think that's absolutely right. I'm glad that you pointed that out. That's why we often joke that tax reform has been moving slowly. I mean, it's been a little bit deliberative for a reason. It's really hard to get consensus around certain points, and it's also the senators and the House members have to deal with a wide variety of issues. That's not to say that they're not very focused on tax reform once it comes down to it, but there are a lot of things going on in the world, as you mentioned, and so I think that as much as the members are going to start to drill down on this, it will still be, it will take some time before we actually get to a full-fledged product.
Yeah. So I just looking at it from the outside, and I think it's going to take a lot of time. I think, given what's going on, I do see collegiality. I think that there are definitely, National Retirement Security Week is one of those things that I think everyone agrees, and it's kind of getting into the brass tacks, if you will, of the details around the brackets, the cost, things that are revenue neutral, and every senator has his or her constituencies that they need to hear from, because that's what they do. They represent the people of their state, or they represent their congressional district, and they need to kind of focus their time listening, right? It's about listening, and listening not only to constituencies, but listening to each other, listening to their staffs, you never get 100%. I recently engaged, and I know I don't get 100% of everything I want, but that's okay. We have to compromise as a people and reach across the aisle to do that.
Right, I think that's right, and I think that you'll see some folks say that, healthcare is hard. I think tax reform will be hard for a much different reason. There will be a lot of different constituencies, and the members and the representatives, they represent different districts in different states, and so you'll see much different feelings on different provisions coming out. The state and local tax deduction is the one that rises immediately to top of mind, because we're in the National League of Cities and the National Association of Counties buildings, perhaps. But that's something that affects some states more than others, and we'll see a lot of those provisions come through that affect some industries that hit some states, and some provisions that don't really matter to other states. And seeing something come together holistically is, I think, going to be a long-term process.
And just, I guess the last question, Senator Cardin's I've mentioned this before, Senator Cardin's probably dealing with a lot of issues. What's top of mind? I know you're focused on tax reform, but can you articulate some of the things that are other issues that are going on, maybe not issues, but concerns or things? You mentioned retirement security, but are there other things that the office is focused on a day-to-day basis that you may not necessarily be directly involved in?
Right. There are a few things. Let me think if I can rattle some off. There's infrastructure. Senator Cardin is the ranking member of the Infrastructure Subcommittee on the Environment and Public Works Committee. That's often something that's tied into tax reform, so I pay a bit of attention to that, along with our infrastructure and environmental staffers. Foreign relations is always high on our agenda because he's ranking member of the Foreign Relations Committee. So anything that falls into the foreign policy sphere, he's going to pay very close attention to. Immigration is another issue that has been coming up in the news recently that he's been paying a lot of attention to. Puerto Rico and hurricane disaster relief, again, something that he cares very deeply about. So there are quite a few things on his plate, but he is planning on focusing a lot of that attention on tax reform as well. I think he'll be paying a lot of attention to the cost and the distributional aspects of tax reform, and we'll just see how a plan shakes out at the end of the day.
Well, Beth Bell, thank you for sharing a little bit of your time today, and we appreciate having you back on Staying Ahead of the Curve.
Oh, of course. Thank you so much for having me again.